look at not just what they're saying, but how the author is using dialogue, how they're setting up the scene, how is it constructed when it reads well for you. Secondly, make sure that you're in the head of every character in the scene that's speaking, not just the main character.
That was local author Sophia Nye sharing helpful tips on how to craft a scene. Stay tuned to hear more about Sophia's journey as an author on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. We'll be back after the intro. Welcome to the Local Author Podcast, sponsored by the Allen County Public Library. This podcast is dedicated to featuring the works of talented authors within our community and highlighting their unique voices and perspectives. Today's author guest is Sophia Nye. Sophia has been writing down stories since she learned how to use a pencil. She loves learning almost as much as she loves writing, pursuing both her undergraduate and master's degrees. Most of her studies involved Ireland and England, and she is excited to expand her research into Scotland. She's been thoroughly enjoying the background reading. After marrying her high school sweetheart, attending grad school, and moving nearly 10 times in as many years, Sophia and her husband settled into a lake house in northern Indiana. They live happily in the middle of nowhere with 2 little boys, 2 atrociously rude doggos, and 1 ornery cat. She is the author of the Warriors of the Fianna series, the Seasons of Scotland series, the Sunder the Stars series, and the Cedar Springs series. Welcome to the podcast, Sophia. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. I love it. So before you share your reading and we discuss your writing processes, I want to tell readers about the book I read to prepare for this interview. It is book 3 in the Warriors of the Fianna series, Into the Ashes, which was released in June 2024. A charming rogue falls for an off-limits ice princess. Rescuing a captive princess is an average day for Diarmid O'Connor, a warrior of the Fianna, so notorious for his charms that his fellow Fianna wager he can't go a fortnight without a woman in his bed. Admittedly, winning the wager would have proven challenging under normal circumstances, but when Diarmid clashes with the rescued princess, he finds himself pining for the only woman he's ever met who doesn't return his affections. Cara O'Donnell, Princess of Turles, just wants to help her family keep their land by marrying the man to whom she's betrothed. When the irritating Diarmid and his band of warriors deliver her to the man's keep, however, he insults her by refusing the betrothal. With the success of their mission at stake, Diarmid convinces Cara to let him help her win over her would-be betrothed by teaching her some of his charms. They fully expect the secret lessons to secure the betrothal. They do not expect to fall in love. Torn between his duty to complete his mission and his growing attraction to the princess, Diarmid walks a fine line between loyalty and betrayal. Can he keep himself away from her for the sake of the mission? Join Diarmid and Cara in a tantalizing forbidden romance filled with temptation, banter, and charm. Okay, Sophia, you're up.
So this is an excerpt that happens while it's early on in the story, and the Fianna are waiting on the princess to get ready so that they can make the final leg of the journey and arrive in Dublin and present her to Sitrick, who she's supposed to marry. So she's taking forever to get ready because she wants to make a good impression, and they're getting quite impatient. I know, right? They're getting quite impatient. Yes. So that's where we're at here.
Okay.
I did my best, Niamh said softly. I'm not trained as a lady's maid. Diarmid dove in, against his better judgment. He was here to see her married to Sitrick, after all. It's just that I don't think Sitrick is the sort who appreciates such a formal appearance. You'd be better off leaving your hair down. Cara's blue eyes blazed, those tempting lips tightening into a thin line. Beside him, Dallin choked on a laugh. Are you actually giving a princess advice on how to present herself? I spent several nights with Sitrick when last he visited, Diarmid defended. He and I have a good deal in common, and he always went after the women who appeared more... More? Cara demanded, her eyes looking about to burst into icy flame. Dallin shook his head. You've done it now. Fun-loving? Diarmid tried. He'd wanted to say less uptight, but he doubted she'd take that well. Are you suggesting that a woman who wears her hair in braids cannot have fun? Diarmid ran a hand through his hair. No, he lied. Not any woman, but this particular woman. Of course not. You know what? I forget I said anything. You look breathtaking either way. The men excused themselves hastily before Diarmid could dig a deeper hole.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
So I love the book, and I can't wait to talk about it, but I always start at the beginning with these podcasts. So when you were growing up, what books did you read?
Fantasy. Pretty much fantasy. Yeah. I read a lot of young adult fantasy. Juliette Marillier and Holly Black were two of my favorite, or very early authors. Lord of the Rings, obviously.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed, in terms of historical fiction, there was a series called The Royal Diaries, not like the Anne Hathaway Princess Diaries.
Sure.
It was like they were written as journal entries by historical princesses and followed parts of their lives leading up to. So like there was one for Anastasia before she disappeared, and there was Cleopatra before she grew into adulthood and took the throne, things like that. So it was really fascinating, and I liked the first person journal style for those.
Yeah, absolutely. So how old were you when you wrote your first story? Do you remember?
Okay, it was in early grade school. I think it was like around second or third grade.
Okay.
We had to do a project where we illustrated it. It was just a couple of pages, and it had those big dotted lines, to fill in the, And so I illustrated and wrote a story about how my little sister was sneaking into the basement to turn into a werewolf, and she didn't like it that much, but I thought it was great.
And you wrote that in the second grade?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's quite an imagination. I like that. So when did you begin thinking, I want to write for a living, or I want to try to write a book?
So I started writing books in high school, and I always wanted to submit them to like an agent to try to go the traditional publishing route. And I always thought that would be a really fun like hobby, like a side project. I never imagined it as my main job.
Sure.
Until COVID, because
you had some time.
I had some time.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So did you know it was going to be romance?
No, actually, my fantasy book, the Sun the Stars series of Shadows and Starlight, that's the book that I started writing in high school. So I always thought it would be fantasy. But my husband, this was all his idea. He's like, you love writing, you're a great writer, we're looking for extra income, just try it. And so he started researching the business end of it so that I could focus just on getting stories out.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So he kind of helped me pick like what web platform to use and like what social media accounts do I really need, and he got them set up for me and things like that. And like how do you market your books? How like just all
I would love it if somebody did that for me.
Yeah. And then he would just sit with me in the evenings and like regurgitate everything he'd read to me. And he's like, this is what you need to know. And it was so helpful. And he's the best.
We need to bring him on the podcast
He's
as well.
upstairs.
And he can tell us what he learned about the background stuff.
Yeah.
That's also important. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you begin during COVID? You said you had the story that you started in high school. So did you just pick up that document and just run with it?
So the thing was, after he started doing this research, he said I needed a smaller market to launch into because epic fantasy is massive. Right. It's absolutely flooded with traditional publishers, and it's a really hard market to just squeeze yourself into and be seen at all. So there was like a market size we were looking for. And historical romance was a genre that I read frequently and loved.
Okay.
I have my degree in history, medieval history. And, it was probably of genre romance the most I'd read, other than maybe fantasy romance. And it fit the market size. And so he was like, let's try that one. And so that's how I started my Seasons of Scotland series.
Okay. I got to read all of these.
No, you're fine.
I only read the one. I got to read some more. So it's my next question was, but I feel like I got the answer a little bit. I was going to ask you, did anything help you or motivate you to get you started? But it sounds like your husband did this, and that's wonderful.
I would never have gone to doing it full time or even dreamed of doing it full time if he hadn't pushed me to do that. So.
Okay, that's great. So, speaking of inspiration, do you have any go-to resources when you hit a wall?
I do. I have a cheat sheet. Every time I hit one, I go to it and I go through all of these different steps to try to determine what's causing the pause.
Oh, yeah.
And then most of the time it's one of those things, and if it's not, then I find a new thing to add to my cheat sheet.
Okay. Is there one thing that gives you pause more than others? Do you feel like that, or is it just a mix of things?
There are like 50 things on the sheet that can halt your progress in writing. I think for me, the ones that are at the tops are I'm not doing a good job taking care of myself. Like I'm getting so wrapped up in the project that I'm forgetting to sleep well or to go outside ever or to take a break. Yes. And I'm draining myself. That's probably my number one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then number two would be the scene isn't working, and it's not working because I either need to know more about what's going on or it isn't meant to be a part of the story.
I see. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good advice or good information. Yeah. All right. So as I was reading Into the Ashes, I had to write down the Gaelic and Celtic terms and then look up how to pronounce them online. I was like, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this right as I get through it. So did you know how to pronounce them before working on the books? Because I know you have some background in like the history and you've studied Ireland. But did you know how to pronounce these, or are you having to figure it out too as you're writing the story?
A little of both. So in grad school, I read a lot of the primary sources in English, but the names were all very Irish. And we discussed them in class a lot. And one of the students in my graduate program was actually from Ireland, too. And so that helped hearing him say things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I knew most of the names I knew because they're fairly common medieval and actually modern too, Irish names.
Yeah. Sure.
There was only one thing, the Thurles, the name of the city that Cara's from. I said it Thurles, which according to the internet, I wanted to double check before I read it aloud or something. And according to the internet, that is a very, very non-Irish way to say it. It's Turles. So that's the only one that I really had any trouble with.
Okay.
I did have to research I tried to stick as much as possible to the actual old Irish names of things and like what they would have been called in that time period, which is why I changed the name of Dublin to Difflin. That was when it was occupied by the Norse. That was what the Norse were calling it. And so things like that. So I had to go look up the older versions of the names for places.
Okay. Absolutely. So Diarmid, I'm saying that correctly.
Yes.
Okay, Diarmid is one of the main male characters in Into the Ashes. So how did you choose his name, or how did you choose Citric or Dalin? And there was Conan?
Conan and Cormac are both characters.
Yes.
Diarmid's brothers.
Yes. How did you pick their names?
Okay, so I love names. So
Oh, okay. Well, that makes it that's fun.
Yeah.
Kind of easy.
So several of the characters, Diarmid, Finn, and Conan, are all actual members of the legendary Fianna band from Irish mythology.
Oh, yeah.
Finn is the namesake of the band. Fianna and Finn, I mean, he's the leader of the Fianna in mythology. He's not in my books, but yes. And Diarmid actually in mythology, I think, steals his wife, which is really funny. So
Steals Finn's wife?
That's why I made him the charmer character, because
it makes sense.
yeah,
It tracks.
Kind of a bit of a Lancelot there.
Yeah.
So, and then all of 99% of the side characters that are royalty in some way, because Ireland at this time is broken into a number of different kingdoms, and they all have kings and queens and princes and everything, all the way down to the smallest,
Right.
governable body.
Sure.
So Brian Boru is a historic king.
Yes.
Gormla, Citric, Cahill, Malachy A, they were all actual historical figures. Citric Silkenbeard was the king of Dublin during this time, and Gormla was his mother. They're all, and I did a ton of research on all of these characters. I read articles on them by historians from JSTOR and things like that. And so yeah, they're all
Sure.
strongly based. I think I took the most liberties with probably Brian and Citric because they're the ones that appear the most. And I definitely did Cahill dirty a little bit, and I feel kind of bad about that later on in the series. But I needed a villain, and he was there, and it happens. But
yes.
But yeah, they're all based on historical figures.
I figured that Brian was based on Brian Boru. I started doing a little digging too as I was reading the book, and I was like, okay, but I didn't dive deep enough apparently because I didn't know that about the other names.
Well, the events in the books are all taken from the Irish Annals.
Oh,
so A really did come down into Brian's territory at some point, and there was he burned Turles to the ground, and that actually happened. And
so there's a nonfiction thread through these books.
there is, yeah.
Okay.
Not all of it, but a lot of it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's really cool. That's a good point to know. So how do you craft good, entertaining dialogue? Because this is harder than it appears, and you did a very nice job. So do you have any tips or tricks on that?
Absolutely. I actually was really terrible at dialogue when I started writing. So I basically just made myself write it till I got better at it.
Sure.
And like tried to write mostly scenes that had dialogue, like a ton of dialogue. But my tips are, number one, read books with good dialogue, and then dissect why it works for you. Like look at not just like what they're saying, but like how the author is using dialogue tags, how they're setting up the scene. Do they stop while people are talking and tell you something about them? Like how is it constructed when it reads well for you, right? And then secondly, make sure that you're in the head of every character in the scene that's speaking, not just the main characters or the point of view characters.
Oh, yeah.
So you need to know, so like if there's two characters talking and one is the point of view character, the other character, you need to know what their goal is, why they're having this conversation, what they hope to get out of it, and any problems they might have with any of the other characters being discussed. And that'll add tension naturally to the conversation if you know that. And tension is where the snappy dialogue comes from. So, and then finally, write everything and then cut what you don't need in editing, because it's so much easier to just write how a character's feeling, thinking, looking, doing, and then take it out later when it's too much.
Yeah.
And pare it down.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I had a couple favorite lines from the book that I wrote down, and I just want to say those now. The one is just sort of like the part of the line, so I apologize because it may not make a ton of sense, but I love this line. It was very poetic. It was puddles of water blacker than a pond in hell. Oh my gosh, I love that line. That really stuck out to me right away. And then there was another one. We live our lives with bright colors, searching for the subtle... Okay, let me say that one again because I got it a little wrong and I want to make sure I get it right for our listeners. We live our lives with bright colors, searching for subtle hues of the same shade. And I think... Is that Citric saying that to Kara? I don't know, but I love it. I love that line.
Thank you. That's so awesome. That's actually, I think it's Diarmid. It was one of the lines I was considering reading aloud.
Oh, see?
But the scene was too long to get to that part, and but that's where I try to drop the title into the book in every book, and that's right after that line is where they use the title.
Oh, okay. I asked you about that a little further down. So. All right. How we know. So was there a part of the book or books that you especially enjoyed writing?
Yes. So it's different with every book I write. But with this one, I really enjoyed getting to write Citric. He was, so if it helps, I picture him as Chris Hemsworth as Thor. Like this big, happy, like...
I kind of have the same vibe about him in my mind. Yeah. Yes, so absolutely, 100%.
When I write his lines, I hear Chris Hemsworth talking in my head as Thor. And it's so much fun. It's like writing a script for a movie, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and I also really enjoyed Diarmid's character because I hadn't written a rogue character before, like a charming rogue. And it was really fun to play with that as a character trait.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So do you find the steamy scenes hard to write?
Yes.
Okay. Is it embarrassing or is it just like...
Well, it's a little of both. My family reads all of my books because they love me very much and they're very sweet. And I think that they actually enjoy them too because you read one to be nice, but they read them all.
Yeah, they must. Yeah.
And so knowing that like my aunts and cousins and mom and stuff are going to all be reading these, or I have to really separate myself from my audience to write them.
Yes, I would have to do the same thing.
Yeah. So, but I deliberately chose to write steamy romance because I feel like fiction, the point of fiction is to normalize parts of the human experience. And I feel like the part of human experience that romance normalizes is falling in love and acting on being in love. And I don't think it's, personally, I know that there are a lot of people that prefer closed-door romances. So they're outside of that. For me, when I read a romance, it's kind of like, it's not like falling in love, but it's like teaching you how to be in a positive relationship, right? And to balance all of the different aspects of that relationship. And so I felt like taking that out was really taking out what I felt was part of the heart of the story.
Yeah. Are there resources for writing an intimate scene?
Yes.
Okay.
There are, I mean, you can just get on Amazon and there are bunches of books and everything. And I took a course that was helpful, but it didn't really get at what I was really looking for to help me break through any blocks. What I found worked the best was just reading different people's blog posts by other writers and like how they write steamy scenes that work. And I kind of collected all of those and put them together. And I also used, it's called the Motivation Reaction Unit.
Okay.
It's by Dwight Swain. It's in, I forget what the book is called, but he has a book where he teaches writing. And that's like the basis of the writing is you break down every scene into motivation reaction units.
Oh, okay.
Like what's pushing a character to do something and then what's the reaction. And it's broken down even further than that. And I find that sequence really helps pull me out of it emotionally so that I can think of it more like an action sequence and, get through it a little bit easier.
Sure. So how long did it take you to write each of these books?
So in every series I write, the first book takes the longest because I'm doing more research.
Yeah.
And I'm coming up with the entire cast of characters. And, it just takes longer to figure everything out as I'm going. So the first book, Song of the Fianna, I think took 3 or 4 months probably. And I rewrote the first 50 pages like 3 or 4 different times before I was happy with it. And that was the first book I'd ever done that with.
Okay.
But I really wanted it. I had a really specific idea of what I wanted it to be, and I wanted to make sure I got there.
You nailed it?
Yeah, I nailed it. And then the other 2 books, Prince of Fire and Into the Ashes, took, I think, 4 to 6 weeks. And I actually just finished writing book 4, and I think it also falls into that.
Oh, that's quick.
Yeah.
You're fast.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not huge books. This one comes in, Into the Ashes comes in at like just under 200 pages. And I read it in like, I don't know, 4 days. No, I couldn't put it, I read it quickly. I couldn't put it down. I got really invested in the characters and I wanted all the information. So I think if I read the other books in the series, I probably learn more about each character at that time, right? Like I learn more about Dermot in the first 2 books.
So what I was trying
Dermot, sorry.
No, you're totally fine. I learned after writing my first series, I hadn't planned who was going to have each book in that series. I was kind of just flying by the seat of my pants in terms of like who the hero and heroine were going to be. And I didn't like that. And I felt like it wasn't doing me any favors in writing it as a series to not have them connect in any way.
Okay.
So I didn't want the story to be connected because I wanted it to be a complete story in each book. But I did come up with all of the characters and who had what book and what their particular journey was before writing any of the series. Yeah, having learned that lesson, I now do that. And what I try to do is in each book, the main secondary character that's like talking to the hero or heroine the most, I try to make that the character who is the hero or heroine of the next book so that you get to see them on page a lot.
Okay, that makes sense. So, I'm sorry, did you tell me you wrote the next one after this one?
I have. I'm actually writing number 5 right now.
So the next one will be about the Citric sisters.
Yes, see? You figured
Astrid?
it out. Astrid and Cormac.
Yes. I told you I got a little bit involved.
I'm so happy.
I was taking so many notes. Okay, now I've lost track of myself here. Let me see. So how many books have you written in total?
Since I started publishing, I've written 10 full-length novels and 4 novellas of like 30,000 words or less. Okay.
So any tips on naming the book? I feel like that has to be tricky too.
It's so weird. Sometimes I don't even know what to name it till I'm done writing it. And then sometimes I just have this idea for a name and I'm like, oh, that should be a book, you know?
Right.
But if you were trying to like force yourself to come up with a name for a book, I like to come up with themes for the book and then do like a word storm of like, like I pop open a thesaurus, put in words that I associate with the themes and the characters and where I feel the story's going. And then I try to match it to the tone of the book, so it's not like this really happy, cutesy name if it's a pretty heavy book. You know what I mean? But
Right.
I find that usually works pretty well.
And so you said you named Into the Ashes because there's a sentence in here.
I actually came up with the name, so it's really funny. I named it because 2 reasons. They're going into Dublin, and Dublin had just been razed by Brian the year earlier. So I had originally conceived of it being rebuilt when they go. So it's like the ashes of a town, right?
Uh-huh.
But I forgot about that because I got so excited about the rest of the story. And
Oh, well.
yeah, so that didn't happen. But but then I also wanted to do a play on the creation story of the Vikings, which is the ash tree.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought, oh, that's so cool because it's both of those things. But then what ended up finally happening was it kind of turned out that Kara was the ashes of the story, right?
Okay.
Where she's the one who's rebuilding. And
Yeah.
so it ended up becoming her theme accidentally. But I think it still fits.
It totally fits.
Yeah.
It works really well. Are all of your books published by Dragonblade Publishing?
No, just the Warriors of the Fianna series.
Okay, so what other publishers?
I self-publish.
You self-publish.
The rest of them.
Okay. How did you get connected with Dragonblade Publishing?
They have every year a writing contest for historical romance. Mm-hmm. And right as I was wrapping up my Seasons of Scotland series, I saw it advertised on Facebook. And I got this feeling like I should
Do that?
I should do that. I think I could do pretty well in that.
Yeah.
And then I won the whole thing. And
Fantastic.
Yeah,
That's so cool.
I'm really proud of that, actually. I worked really hard for that.
Yes, you should be proud of that.
A lot of late nights.
What year was that?
That was 2022.
Okay, so not long ago.
Not long ago. I think it was 2022. Yeah, and I won the whole contest, the grand prize, and it came with a publishing contract potential for the books that I submitted.
Okay, so does that have a length of time, that contract, or open-ended?
It's pretty open-ended. I think there's I don't remember how many years it is, but after a certain number of years, you can request to have rights back. I don't know if I will or not, but this series is going to be 7 books. I've gotten it extended with them. I submitted the first 3 initially, and they wanted to see how it did before taking the other 4, but it's doing well enough that they wanted the rest of the series, so...
Awesome. That's fantastic. Huh. Are they a traditional publishing house?
They're kind of in between. So they function like a traditional publishing house in the same way that, you submit a query and then it works the same way, but they're on a smaller scale. So they're what you call a boutique publisher. They work mainly with indie authors.
Okay.
And they focus exclusively on historical romance. Different subgenres, they have historical fantasy romance and stuff and things like that, but historical romance is the only genre they'll publish.
Okay. So do they provide an editor? Mm-hmm. And do they help you pick the cover art and all of that?
They have a cover artist that is the one that I also use for my indie published books because she's just phenomenal.
Okay.
But they have you submit anything that you want on the cover or any inspiration photos of the characters if you want them on the cover, things like that. And then they will send you a proof of it to approve, or if you want to make any changes, you can request them.
Mm-hmm. So you said you know what one of your characters looks like in your head. Do you imagine the other characters as anybody?
So I have inspiration photos for every character that's named in the book.
So you just find those on the internet, or?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes, in the case of Citric, I was every time I think of him, that's what I see.
Yeah.
I don't know why his personality to me really came off that way. So that one kind of made itself. And then, I search, I use Pinterest mostly to find them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Is anybody based on your husband?
Yeah, they all are in a way. I feel like every hero and every heroine has one piece of each of us in them. Never the whole thing, but the closest, probably Cormac's character in the next book is the closest I've come to actually writing my husband as a hero.
Okay.
He's very quiet and very observant and very sure of himself, but he won't step in unless, he thinks it's really necessary.
Sounds like my husband.
Yeah.
So here's a question I forgot to ask you. How many hours a day do you spend writing?
It depends on what my deadline is looking like.
Okay.
My ideal amount of hours is 4. But because if you write for 8 hours every single day, it's very depleting because it's very emotionally draining to just pour yourself onto a page for that long.
It's a creative process.
Yeah.
Anything creative is.
And you don't want to be like forcing yourself, because then it reads like you're forcing yourself,
Right.
And so, but then you also have to temper that with, well, I do need to get this book done. I can't just not write. So
Yes.
there's the business aspect of it as well.
Yeah.
So when I'm not on a deadline, I shoot for 4 hours a day, which is enough to get me like around 2 chapters done, which I feel like is pretty good. And then if I am on a tight deadline, I will pretty much just write until I can't write anymore that day.
Okay. Have you ever just like flown through the story and just put it all out into the ashes? Did that?
It was the 4th book in a series of tight deadlines. So it was down literally to like, I think I had 4 weeks exactly to get it to my editor because I had written other books back to back to back to back on really tight deadlines. And this was the one that was taking the biggest hit in terms of how much time I had left to get to it.
Gotcha.
And I just basically locked myself in my office for 3 weeks and wrote it. But I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah. If I had a little bit of pressure, if I have a little bit of pressure, it almost goes better for me.
Yeah,
It almost goes better for me because I can be like, oh, I got to go over here and do this. I need to do this. My dishes need done.
the dishes are the worst. Every time I get up for a snack or something and I go in there, I'm like, man, I really should stop working and do these dishes.
I know. I get distracted way too easily. So if I have a little bit of pressure, I'm like, those dishes have got to wait. Like, that's not the important thing right now.
Exactly.
My husband can take care of those when he gets home.
I like that.
Let him do it. So one more question I forgot to ask. Have you ever been to England, Ireland, or Scotland?
I have, yes. I have been to all 3. I've only been to Scotland once. I've been to England twice. And I've been to Ireland countless times. I got married there, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
that's so cool.
So we had to go a whole week early to get our license and everything fixed up. And and then I went there the most recent trip. I was going every year or two for a while. But then once I had my kids, I haven't been, but we're hoping to take them now that they're a little older. We're hoping to take them soon. So,
okay.
But my last trip was in like 2014, I think. And that was for graduate school for work. We were surveying a potential archaeological site to start excavating. So,
well, that sounds very adventurous.
It was really fun. A lot of hiking through the forest. But that was the first time that I was ever in middle management on an excavation. I was always like the grunt doing like the digging and the carrying of the equipment. But I got to like manage the undergrads, which was really fun.
Better than carrying all that stuff.
Carrying all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that for sure. So I have some fun questions now. I have like 5 of them. So are there any other genres that you would enjoy writing in?
Pretty much everything. I actually just love writing for the sake of writing. And I like, the older I get, the more I realize that my favorite stories matter a lot less about genre and just more about structure.
Okay.
But I've tried writing everything from children's books to horror. So, and pretty much everything in between.
Yeah.
Just for fun. Not like a whole book, but, just see how it goes. See how scary of a scene I can write,
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah. So what's your favorite book?
So my favorite book in terms of intellectual story, like to me, this is just the best book, is Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
I think I won't even start, but I love it. And then on a more personal level, the book that I reread over and over again is Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier. It's a young adult historical fantasy set in early medieval Ireland.
Of course.
And it is the entire reason that I went to grad school for Ireland, that I like gardening, that I ever went to Ireland or studied it. And it's basically, I read it when I was in like 5th grade, and it basically formed my entire personality. So it's still a book that I like. It's very comforting to go back and read it.
When was that book published?
Oh, man. It was a
old?
while ago. Yeah. Like I guess it would probably be the 90s.
Is the author still writing?
Mm-hmm. She is.
Okay.
She's the answer to question number 4.
Oh, okay. Well, we're getting there. So did we, and I, looking at question number 3, I don't know if we talked about this. What's the favorite book you've written?
Okay. I'm going to apologize ahead of time because there are I've narrowed it down to 4.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. They're all your children.
They're all my
children. It's hard to pick a favorite child.
It's almost like asking, like, what's your favorite song? Because it depends on, like, what your mood is.
Absolutely.
Like, what you want to listen to. And that's how I feel about them. Like, they're different moods,
Yeah, right.
Okay. The first one is Of Shadows and Starlight.
Okay.
And that's my fantasy romance.
I want to write this down. Shadows and Starlight. Okay.
And that one is my favorite because it was the first book I ever wrote. It was the only book I thought I would ever publish for years and years and years. I've written probably 4 different versions of it over my life. I started it in high school. I had the first draft in college, the second one in grad school, and then I finally finished it last year. It's the story, when I imagine a fantasy world, that's where I always go. And the characters to me feel more like real people than fictional characters because I've just been thinking of them for so long.
Yeah.
And so they're almost like my friends.
I have a hard time separating myself from that.
Exactly. Kind of like the book boyfriend problem.
Yes.
Yeah. The second one is Prince of Fire, which is the second Fiona book. And that one is the closest I've ever come to writing myself as the heroine.
Okay.
Because the premise of that book is that the heroine is suffering from infertility, and the entire story is her healing from that, basically.
Sure.
And I struggled to have children.
Okay.
It was a whole
process.
I've been pregnant 8 times and I have 2 kids.
Yeah.
So it was not fun. And for a long time, we thought that we weren't going to have children.
Sure.
And so that book, her entire journey is just literally like what I went through. And I know that I will give you a heads up that the only negative feedback I've gotten on it is that her secret that she can't have children is like a point of contention that she's not telling him. But I can speak from experience that you have to be in a special kind of place to share that with somebody.
Yeah.
And she wasn't there yet. So we got her there. But
well, that probably was kind of healing too, to write all that out.
There was one scene, the scene where she actually does finally tell him. When I wrote that, I actually cried so hard I had to stop writing for the rest of the day because it was so like triggering and like, yeah. So that book is one of my favorites for sure because it's really deeply personal to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I actually think that it's just a lot of fun. I'm really happy with how it turned out as a book. But
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The last 2 are faster.
That's all right.
I can talk forever. The third one is A Wild Winter, which is the second book in my Seasons of Scotland series. It consistently gets the highest ratings on Amazon too, so I think I'm not alone in this.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Wild Winter.
It is just good fun. Like every time I pick it up to check and see, I need a quote or I need to like check this page and see what happens, I end up accidentally rereading the whole thing. I can't put it down. I actually just enjoy reading it.
I love that you love to read your own stuff.
Just that one.
I do that with some of my poetry. I'm like, this is really good.
It's like, I don't remember writing this at all. It's like someone else did it.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that was the other thing. I'm sorry. I want to say this about Prince of Fire before we move on to the last one.
Sure.
I wrote that specifically for myself.
Okay.
Because when I was going through all of that struggle with infertility, every single romance I picked up validated the relationship with a child at the end. And it broke my heart.
It does, yes.
So much to read that and feel like I was failing somehow. Maybe there was something wrong with me. Maybe I didn't belong with my husband. It just starts this horrible.
Yep.
And so I wanted to write a book that I wrote the book that I wished I had had to read when I was going through all of that. And
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
that's good to know.
Specifically written for that.
Yes.
And then the last book that I love is The Pact, which is my contemporary romance. It's the first one. And it was the easiest book I've ever written, and I had just so much fun writing it. And it's based on Columbia City.
Oh, okay.
So that series is taking place in basically a fictional Columbia City.
It's cooler in The Pact, Columbia. Oh,
yeah.
Columbia City's a nice town. I've been there.
It is.
They have
So,
some cute shops. Downtown
it is
really cute.
the downtown. It's like the small town.
It's like
cozy.
a Hallmark
It is.
movie.
It's very
almost down there.
Hallmarky. A lot of
Yeah.
it is very Hallmarky. So yeah, I kind of just wrote off that. It's still spicy, but it's Hallmarky.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if you could spend the day with another popular author, who would you choose? And you said it a minute ago, right?
Yeah, Juliet Marillier. She lives in New Zealand, and I follow her on socials and everything, and I would love to just sit down and talk to her about Ireland and mythology and all the books that she's done and just her thoughts on life in general. She seems like a really cool person.
Okay. If your book, if Into the Ashes, let's say if Into the Ashes were made into a movie, we know that Chris Hemsworth would be in it.
Yes, of course.
But who else would star in it? Maybe his brother. His brother could be in it, right?
So Liam is the hero that I modeled in The Pact. The hero in The Pact is Liam Hemsworth.
Hemsworth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's in one of my books.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I actually had a picture that I used, and it looks a lot like the cover model, actually. But I had to look up. He's an actual model. It's not the cover model, but
Right.
but I mean, he's a model too. But the image I was using for inspiration is a male model named Willem de Klerk. He has an Instagram. He's
They all have
very
an Instagram.
good looking.
Willem Clark.
There's also a politician named that, and it's not him. It'll be very clear, though.
Oh, yes. I bet it will.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think he's an actor, though. He is who I would absolutely have cast if I had a choice and he could act, but I don't know that he can. So if not him, it would be Zac Efron. I think he looks very similar in terms of the facial structure.
It does. Yeah, I can see that. I'm
Yeah.
also seeing Jared Leto.
Oh, maybe I could see that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted him to be a little less. I'm an alpha male girl.
I know. I am too.
I can't help it. But
I know. I'm
wanted
not mad
him
at
to
you.
be a little more approachable because he's supposed to be this like roguish type. So I wanted him to be a little more of like the pretty boy as opposed to like a, just a big tough alpha guy. So,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Kara, the picture I have for her looks a lot like Megan Fox.
Oh, okay.
Bright blue eyes, really dark hair, and the face shape and face
I
structure
can
is very
totally
similar.
see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Chris Hemsworth is Citric, obviously. Cormac is Brock O'Hearn. I found out the picture I had is actually an actor. I didn't know that, but he's
Figured it out.
I figured it out. Yeah, and his name is Brock O'Hearn. Neve, who is the side character, is Sophia Miles from like Tristan and Isolde.
Okay. I don't know.
Oh, it's a good movie.
Okay. What is it called?
Tristan and Isolde.
Tristan and his old?
And Isolde, Isolde. You're good. You're good. It's a good movie. It's an old movie, but it's a good movie.
Okay.
That's her, and Dallin is Henry Cavill. Her. And then Conan, the other brother, is Alexander Draymond.
I don't know that one either.
Uhtred. Oh, please tell me you've seen The Last Kingdom.
No.
Oh, come on.
I don't know The Last Kingdom. What's The Last Kingdom on?
Okay, The Last Kingdom is on Netflix, I think. And it's a book series. It's a wonderful book series by Bernard Cornwell.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay. I know Bernard. We have all kinds of his books. I had no idea they made that book into a series.
Best adaptation I've seen of a
totally
historical
in.
fiction.
Okay, I'm totally in.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start it tonight.
It's my books. How I pitch this series is that it's The Last Kingdom in Ireland with happily ever afters. That's the whole pitch because that's what it is. It's the same historical setting. It's when the Vikings are on the fringes and there's fractured kingdoms. It's like the same exact sort of setup.
Okay.
So you need to watch it.
All right. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then last but not least, Liam Neeson is Brian Boru.
Yeah. Yes. Makes total sense.
I mean, how could he not, right?
I know.
Yeah.
You have to put Liam Neeson in there.
He has to be in there. Yeah.
Okay. So what's next, Sophia?
So I have 4 more books in this series. I've written one. I'm working on another. And those start coming out in August of 2025.
Okay.
And then my focus going forward is probably going to be my contemporary books. I plan to write those and publish them probably every 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
Ad nauseum. And I also plan to write fantasy romance and kind of transition into those two as my main categories.
Okay. And so, last but not least, how can fans reach you?
I have a website that my lovely husband helped me set up.
It's a nice website, too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's sophiannyewrites.com. You can find There's like a place there that you can email me and send me messages. I also have a newsletter sign up there. You can get on my mailing list. And if you're on there and you reply to any email, I'll get it. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Sophia Nye Writes. I am also on Amazon, Goodreads, and BookBub.
Okay. You can find her. For sure.
Somewhere.
Yes.
Just put it into Google.
Yes, and you'll find her. That's right. Sophia, thank you for joining us on Pages and Voices. It has been a lot of fun to have you here.
Thank you so much. I've loved it.
And thank you to those who listened in. Stay tuned for more authors on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Pages and Voices, a source for local authors and their stories. From the studios of Access Fort Wayne at the Allen County Public Library in downtown Fort Wayne, Indiana, I'm your host, Meg Bell. A special thank you to Kay Gregg for her work engineering and editing this episode. We've explored fascinating stories and insightful discussions today, but our journey doesn't end here. Find more episodes of Pages and Voices wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with the area's authors and their insights into the written word. Until next time, keep turning the pages, and we look forward to welcoming you back soon.